Greetings, everyone. My name is Sarah Barnes, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I would like to welcome you to Hiring Outside the Box, How to Find Alternative Fundraising Talent, one of many webinars in our free webinar series. We are broadcasting live from our office in downtown Chicago. We hope you all are having a fantastic day, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. Close any programs other than GoToWebinars, of course, that are running on your computer. Call in using a telephone instead of using your computer's speakers. You move your cell phone away from your computer. And finally, if you experience any visual issues, you can send a chat to Campbell & Company, or you can contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you will earn 1 continuing education credit, and that is good for your participation with CFRE International. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate. And yes, this webinar is being recorded. The follow-up email will also contain a link to the recording. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar. Please use the questions box on the right-hand side on your computer screen. We will also hold time at the end of the webinar for some Q&A. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dan Fissinger, who is an executive search consultant at Campbell & Company, who will introduce our guest panelists.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Want to introduce our fine panel this afternoon. First joining us is Mike Doyle. Mike is the Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Loras College. He's also the CFO. Mike graduated with a bachelor's in finance and business marketing from Loras College, went on to receive his Juris Doctorate from Marquette, and became a certified financial planner with successful tenures at Northwestern Mutual Life, Richardson Financial Group, and Ernst & Young, working as a financial advisor focused on retirement, investment, and estate planning. In 2007, Mike returned to his alma mater as the director of the Loras Fund. In 2009, was promoted to Director of Development. 2011, Associate Vice President. And in 2012, he became the Vice President for Institutional Advancement. In the first 5 years as VP, Mike's advancement team has had 5 of the top 6 fundraising years in Loras's 178-year history, and also spearheaded the largest campaign to date, completed last summer, raising $106 million on a $100 million goal. In 2016, Mike was appointed Interim VP for Finance and Administrative Services, and that appointment became a permanent appointment last year. Our next panelist, James Hansen, is the Associate Vice President for University Advancement at Marquette University. James received his bachelor's from Boston University, a master's degree from Harvard University's Extension School in Management, and is also a candidate for a master's in theological studies at Boston College, set to receive that this year. Prior to transitioning to higher education, James was the Vice President of Sales and Operations at Bear Stearns and GE Capital, and managed high-performing teams as large as 150 individuals. He transitioned to higher ed advancement in 2007, serving MIT, University of Southern California, and Boston College in campaign leadership roles, part of the launch of a $6 billion campaign at USC and completing a $1.5 billion campaign before coming to Marquette. In his current role as the Associate VP, he oversees principal gifts, college advancement, parents giving, annual giving, and athletics, and is the fundraising lead on capital projects along with the campaign director. Third panelist today is Lynn Human. Lynn is the Assistant Director of Recruitment and Human Resources for University of Michigan's Office of University Development. Lynn earned her bachelor's degree from University of Michigan and her Juris Doctorate from Fordham University. And after practicing law for 4 years at Jenner & Block here in Chicago, she transitioned to human resources, first at the law firm and then at Deloitte Consulting for 9 years. She first joined Deloitte as the Regional Human Resources Director, and before leaving was Deloitte Consulting's Learning Director for North and South America. She decided to transition to higher education to be a little bit closer to home, joined University of Michigan's Office of Development in 2011, where she assists on many hiring processes for the advancement team, in addition to direct fundraisers, communications folks, and a wide variety of functional roles. Wanted to walk you through what our time together will look like today. Our introduction and presentation of our findings from the research will take up the first 30 minutes or so. We'll then move into a panel discussion and questions, asking each of the panelists to describe their transition to nonprofit development and some of the things that they benefited from in their previous work, and also some of the challenges that they've encountered. And then, of course, we will leave about 15 minutes at the end for all of your questions. We do hope that you'll submit questions throughout the course of the presentation today. So just wanted to walk you through, before I jump into the slides here, I jumped prematurely. You know, this has been an ongoing topic in the world of development for many years. Not having an adequate supply of folks in the profession has led to some hiring challenges, especially as philanthropy becomes a more important part of higher education revenue. We wanted to explore this topic, reached out to more than 200 universities, both their chief development officers as well as human resource officers that supported development, and asked them to complete a survey to gather quantitative information about their attitudes and experience hiring non-traditional talent. We then followed up with 17 individuals in phone conversations to get qualitative descriptions and to have them share their experiences about hiring fundraisers, both traditional and non-traditional. So the institutions surveyed actually represented a pretty good cross-section of the higher ed world. As an example, about 18% of our shops were raising less than $5 million a year. 38% were raising between $5 and $20 million a year. About 23% were between $20 and $50 million annually. 8% were in the $50 to $100 million range. And then 13% of the universities that we were connected with are raising in excess of $100 million annually. So with that, I'll sort of jump into the findings of our research. First major takeaway from the survey and our conversations is that advancement leaders in higher ed revealed pervasive hiring and retention challenges in staffing their development teams. More than 70% of respondents said that they struggled to hire and retain frontline major gift officers in the past 2 years. You know, as higher education institutions continue to rely more heavily on philanthropy as a key source of revenue to achieve their strategic priorities, this lack of talent is really becoming an issue. Institutions both large and small are growing their operations, looking to set lofty campaign goals, and with this growing need for revenue, the market for accomplished major gift fundraisers has become incredibly competitive. That experienced major gift officer is in high demand, and we see this not only from the survey results, but also our personal experiences. This heated battle for talent is ongoing, which has led to higher industry turnover, and in turn, in some cases, lack of continuity with donors, which is really problematic. Goodness. Our second major takeaway today is that there are a few common career sectors that produce more candidates making the switch to philanthropy. You can see some of the different sectors that we have or roles that we have listed here. More than 64% of our respondents are intentionally recruiting non-traditional talent for direct fundraising roles, and these are some of the places that those folks have come from. What we found is that these careers or these functional roles often require the same type of requisite skills that we're looking for in fundraisers. To walk you through some of those professions, you know, bankers are often highly relationship driven. possess a comfort level talking about money, particularly with high net worth individuals. Wealth managers and financial planners have that same comfort. They're also trained to work towards goals and are often familiar with scorecards. University admissions officers is something that came up in several of our conversations and survey results. These officers are accustomed to the travel requirements of a development role and are comfortable working towards quotas. And they often have a really strong affinity or connection to the institution. Athletics coaches were another group that was identified. They have a competitive drive and are often very process-oriented. They know how to fill gaps and build collaborative teams. Attorneys can often make the transition successfully. They understand the nuances of client relationships and really bring a niche expertise in gift and estate planning. Real estate brokers often have an affinity for social skills in stressful situations, and they really know how to close a deal. And political campaigners are very data-driven and understand how to target messaging to particular audiences. So I think those are some of the positions that have successfully made the transition coming out of our research. The next major takeaway is that in order to overcome this challenge, universities and colleges need to think creatively and proactively about their recruiting. More than 25% of our respondents have an on-staff HR professional focused on the issues of the advancement team. These roles on the advancement team, particularly the frontline fundraising positions, have traditionally been filled by universities' central HR department or by the direct hiring manager, who likely has a plethora of other responsibilities, including managing their own portfolio of donors. This means that in the past, institutions have really relied on posting their positions and waiting for applications to come in. It's referred to as post and pray. One solution that we found to that is to assign one or several HR representatives to be embedded within the development team, working directly with managers and leadership to fully understand short and long-term strategies and goals. In fact, our research indicates that the more established development shops consider this a best practice to have HR embedded within the team. New strategies for recruitment are also necessary, such as actively recruiting passive candidates who may not be looking for a new role. Using social media, networking, and referrals can create pipelines of talent for future vacancies and eliminate some of the competitive elements in competing for talent with other institutions. Another major takeaway from our conversations and the survey results was that advancement leaders should look within their own institutions for both immediate and future fundraising hires. Many of the leaders we spoke with said that a connection to the university is one of the most important things when considering a non-traditional profile. Universities already employ large numbers of people with a built-in affinity for the institution and a familiarity with the culture and key players. An alumni with transferable skills can also be a really good source of new talent. Several respondents discussed successful fundraisers on their team that were previously working in university admissions or as athletics coaches. People in these roles are often comfortable working towards a numeric goal, interacting with diverse groups of people, and have that built-in passion for the institution. Another avenue that was highlighted in our conversations is indicated by the quote on our screen right now. Internship programs can be really effective ways to build talent for the future. While this is a long-term approach that's unlikely to bear fruit in current or upcoming campaigns, developing talent in-house can be very effective in the big picture. This quote was talking about the internship program at a large public university, and the program has been in place for about 10 years at this point, and hiring five 5 or 6 individuals from that intern class every year has resulted in 30 to 40 members of the team who have come in through that entry point. Our next major takeaway is that consultants can help in recruitment and other facets of HR. 66% of our respondents have not used an executive search firm for frontline fundraising positions in the last 2 years, but we think this is going to change. There are a variety of costs associated with hiring, especially if a hire doesn't work out the way everyone wants. We have HR staff time, the manager's time, accrued paid time off, temporary coverage. We have to consider replacement costs, the new hire's compensation, hiring inducements, and hiring, the time spent on hiring by management. There's training costs, training travel time and materials, mentoring time, and the productivity loss that can be attributed to that. There's also intangible costs, delays in service, reduction in quality of service, other staff defections or project disruptions. And the cost to hire when a placement doesn't work out, the cost to rehire can actually be more than 30% of the employee's first year earnings. So with so much at stake, it's not a surprise that about a third of higher ed institutions we surveyed are using external executive search services. Search consultants like myself are able to employ sophisticated research, access a wider pool, recruit passive candidates, and network with industry leaders, and really just dedicate more time than folks within the institution are able to, given other responsibilities. So we've gone through our takeaways from the survey and conversations with development. I wanted to hand it over to our panelists here to just give sort of a brief introduction to their transition into higher education. What are some of the skills that they developed in their prior work that they really benefited from? And what are some challenges that they might have encountered along that transition process? So I'd like to welcome Mike to address that first. Mike, if you wouldn't mind, walk us through your transition from being a certified financial planner to where you are currently.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome everybody. But I guess for me, the transition was in terms of the skill set required from my perspective. While I came back as director of the Loris Fund, that lasted all of about 3 months back in '07. The real purpose in me coming back to Loris, I had a connection with the then vice president for advancement at Loris. He and I went to school together. Was eventually I would move into the development officer role when something opened up and they had an open position. But it was good for me to come back and learn the basics of the annual giving and all that goes into that component, from phone-a-thon to direct mail, and to really get a sound base in the business. But in terms of the skill set of moving in as a development officer, the skill set's pretty much similar to that of a financial planner, or in terms of any estate planning that I may have been involved in as well, in terms of talking about planned gifts. So from that standpoint, it was pretty smooth. The people skills, the relationship building, when you make that hire, to me, the biggest thing is you have to make the judgment, is the person going to be able to pick up the phone call to begin with, get the appointment, and then once getting the appointment, are they going to be able to close the deal? So that's a big part. The biggest frustration, I had to grow used to how it works in terms of academia, how I like to put it. Things moved at a much slower pace at Loris College when I came back than say at Ernst & Young. And they continue to move at a slower pace than what I would like, but you become accustomed, and there are ways where that's good in terms of it's helped me grow in terms of patience as a professional and making sure things are fully thought through. But also, I think I've been able to help out in terms of speeding up the process at times. So from that's in terms of transition, and then the frustrations for me.
Thanks, Mike. James, same question to you. Just sort of walk us through your transition. What are some of the skills you developed in earlier work that you've really taken advantage of in your advancement career? And what were some of the hurdles in making the transition?
Sure, thank you. It's good to be with you all, and certainly this panelist. As working for Marquette University, I think I'm compelled to note that I'm sharing the panel with two Ignatian-trained lawyers. So just a plug for Jesuit education before I get into my answer. So again, good to be with you, and thank you. I'll say for me, I had a slightly different, I think, transition into the world than what Mike did. I worked in financial services for quite a while and had a successful career. In 2007, when the world melted a little bit, my sector that I worked in almost exclusively went away. And that wasn't something that I wanted to continue. So I wanted to be in a sustainable career and be able to give back in the way that I had been taught and trained, in the way that I wanted to live my life. And as I learned about higher ed advancement, that seemed to fit a lot of the criteria that I had for myself and how I wanted to live in the world. So, for me, it was sort of an interesting process. I went back to the city of Boston, and I applied for major gift jobs at some 4 name brand universities. The one that you'll see that registers on my resume that you announced, Dan, was MIT, and I was able to successfully, I think, market myself to them insofar as I had come from a fairly high level in large organizations that were recognizable. So that was probably relieving on one level. They just assumed there was a skill set there, and the interview process was obviously fairly successful. But I think really, the main reasons why I was able to be a successful candidate in that search and then have the beginning of my career there was 2 things. One, there was a culture of innovation there. So you touched, I think, in your comments a little bit, Dan, on, or I think others will talk a lot about wanting to jump into this lane, into this pipeline of talent, but really are reticent to actually do so. MIT has got a long history of being innovative and fearless, or managing risk fairly well. So I think that was part of their DNA or their culture. The other piece of it, too, was their managers are very, very confident in their ability to train and teach individuals that come into their organization that have an existing skill set at a high level, and be able to make that transition. And I think that's why, of the 4 places that I sought out, that was the one that came back the quickest, and that was obviously the successful one. In terms of, what day one and in the first 6 months and the first 12 months were like for me in academia, coming from financial services, very similar to what Mike described. The 2 biggest challenges for people coming from the environment that we came from into academia are pace and communication. The pace itself was very different. I'll use the word deliberate, and I think that it's a very deliberate type of pace at universities, because it has worked, and it does work, and it allows for a lot of discernment, reflection, and getting things right, moving forward to consensus. And I think that that's an important thing for universities. So I'm not in any way saying that should change, but boy, that's very different than what I had come from. So I had to learn that. The organization wasn't going to evolve around me. I needed to couple and assimilate to it, and that was different. Related to, but separate, is the communication style. I think coming from financial services, we can at times speak in bullets. Very short sentences, moving very quickly, not complete thoughts. That didn't work. That doesn't work in higher ed academia, and that was a challenge to use all of my vocabulary and to really unpack and build out thoughts completely, and sometimes to exercise the ability to make statements by asking questions. That's a big part of the communication that I had to learn. Ultimately, these are all learned skills. Again, if you have people come into the organization that are wanting to be there, willing to adapt and change, and then you have good leadership and management for people to work with them, the transition itself doesn't take a long time. but it does require some conversations, I think, particularly initially, so that you can identify what those challenges are and then work through them.
Thanks, James. Lynn, same question to you. Just sort of walk us through your transition from the corporate world to the advancement team at University of Michigan.
Thanks, and it's good to be here and with my co-panelists. We had a great time when we did this in person in Chicago, and wanted to share it with a broader audience. So thank you for being here. My story is I was with Deloitte, and I was traveling globally. And when I wanted to have a family, it was time to not travel like that anymore for me. I didn't want that. So, kind of a lesson, more broad lesson is we know that people at different stages of life have different needs, and being open to that is good. Anyway, the University of Michigan was in my town, and I also went here, so it was a great transition to be able to work here. Since I had done human resources at Deloitte, the transition for me was really about the subject matter of advancement and learning about fundraising from that perspective, so I could support and hire fundraisers and fundraising support. And I've been able to do that, and the skill that I've employed and has served me well is curiosity, and we look for that in people as well, especially people coming in with transferable skills. We want to see curiosity, people who want to learn, want to listen, and I try to employ that myself, and have learned this business. So.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. And that actually serves as a perfect segue to a question I have for you. I'm interested in what you're looking for when you're reviewing candidate profiles for a direct fundraising role. What types of experiences or things on a resume are you looking for in a non-traditional candidate? I've been impressed with our discussions about this personally, and also just it seems like the University of Michigan is open to is genuinely open to hiring folks who come from different backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very true, and one of the reasons is, and I think many of us in our places of business where we're working have this interest. Where the University of Michigan is very committed to diversity and inclusion, and in order to, make that happen, you have to have a very large pool and people coming from all different careers. That's really helpful with that. So that's definitely spurred us on even more. But we are very open to people with transferable skills, and you mentioned some of those, when you were going through the list of industries. So, we do look for people, if it's a fundraising role they're interested in, we're looking for people that have that ability to communicate with people, that can have different conversations with different people, that can, sort of spot how to talk to people in different walks of life and that type of thing. Curiosity is really important to us, and good listening, active listening as well. So those kinds of things. Something that I've thought a lot about, and we've thought a lot about here, is kind of the hustle factor. You want, no matter where someone's worked, were they somebody who was the person that people relied on in their offices? Were they, were they go-getters? And that often serves fundraisers well. And it really anybody who's working in a fast-paced environment. And I've actually found, maybe a little bit unlike, I don't know, unlike maybe the other panelists said, but I found that coming here in the development arm of the university, I mean, it's really big business. So it has matched in many ways the pace of Deloitte. What's more challenging is, we don't, universities don't necessarily meet the salaries and those kinds of things that private industry does. So, you have to show your candidates, what you can offer them, and they have to come with a certain amount of mission orientation and mission vision. So.
Thanks, Lynn. And sort of as a follow-up to that, where have you found, or what entry point have you found folks coming in at when making this transition? Has there been a particular role that's had success several times, or is it sort of a one-off each time you're considering a candidate like that?
That's a good question. I would say that, it has to be kind of a sweet spot. Somebody coming in can't, most of the time can't be making so much money that the only way they really would transition would be to a very senior fundraiser. But, very often people understand that they're making that change and they will be taking a little bit of a cut in salary in the beginning, but there still has to be some sort of, close transition in that way. So I think that we like to see people coming in as what we call major gift officers, intermediate, or, assistant directors, or, it's called different things in different places, but, often, somebody with a good background in banking or sales, those kinds of things, they may be able to, come in at about that level, kind of intermediate.
If I could add in there, Dan, it ties into my situation. Or if you're working for an organization, or you have somebody that has a passion. I have a great passion for Loras College and what it means to be a DoHawk. So I was one of those guys. I was at the senior manager level at Ernst & Young, and it was a significant pay cut. But it worked well in our family, and for me, it had a lot to do with having two young boys under the age of 8 and not having much of a life with them. And so that was a big selling point for me. It was going from working the 80 hours a week to work. I still had 60 to 70 hour weeks, but some of that was involved with the college and they could be with me. So I would just caution folks out there. I agree, Lynn's 100% correct. But if you have somebody and there's a relationship or an affiliation or an affinity for an organization, somebody may be willing to take that chance to take the significant pay cut, because then they have an idea of a career path to get back to that level of where they were at one point. Now, I've been fortunate and blessed to achieve that, but it's going to take a special set of circumstances. Otherwise, Lynn's right. I mean, there is going to be some sort of cut involved there.
Absolutely, and I think, I was definitely trying to think about many people, but we certainly have people just like Mike who have been making a lot more and much further in their career and have been successful with us.
Just to add one thing too, Dan, to the panel, I'll say, related to Lynn and what Mike was saying, organizations have to justify why they're bringing somebody into a major gift role that may be non-traditional. But I think one of the easiest pathways to doing that is to be able to demonstrate and defend the hire by saying, well, this is a person that has managed elsewhere for a number of years. One of the things that I have found to be true, and maybe others have as well, is a lot of managers in our world become managers because they are really, really great fundraisers, and that's the right place, or that's the only next place to go. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have been trained in management. Maybe they get taught and trained along the way, which I think it can work and is fantastic. But when you think about entry point and Lynn's answer, one of the ways, if you're willing to have a person like Mike or like James to make an investment in themselves and take a significant pay cut, which I agree, Mike, I experienced that as well. That's really the play, is to say, okay, well, there's part of this person's resume and skill set that doesn't have to be taught, that really isn't all that relevant or available at times in development shops. If this is something that can be taught based on the other skill sets that are being demonstrated, that's a win-win. And so related to those two points that Lynn and Mike made, I wanted to add that as well.
Thank you all for that. I'm interested in particular or individual experiences you have with making a non-traditional hire, and what type of onboarding process needed to be involved in order for the person to get up to speed. I think I'd like to direct this to all three of you, given the sort of different sizes that your universities represent. Maybe we could start with Lynn.
Sorry there, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty. I think I'm doing okay. Sorry about that, Dan. Could you just repeat the end of that question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you have particular examples of folks that have made the transition, obviously not mentioning them by name, but sort of what their background looked like and what sort of modifications or just what sort of onboarding was required in order for that person to be successful?
Thank you. Yeah, we have a pretty significant onboarding for fundraisers in general, and we have not yet parsed it out so that if they're a non-traditional hire or not, if they haven't had fundraising, that they go through something different. We do have a major gift officer curriculum, something called Leadership Blue. We have various things that people can go through. What's been really key in these programs is that there's a cohort component, so that 20 major gift officers, sort of maybe at a certain point, maybe they're new to Michigan or new to fundraising, they're starting together and going through 10 months of classes together, and they come out with a strong group. There's nothing like that, of having that camaraderie and people to go to and talk to across campus. It's really effective. So that's been the key to the onboarding, is this cohort idea.
And either Mike or James, representing slightly smaller institutions, I would guess that you're not bringing on 20 people or a large cohort at any one time. How do either of you think about the onboarding process when bringing someone on from a non-traditional background?
I'll defer to James first.
Okay. So I'll give two examples of sectors that I hired in and kind of how I handle it. So I'll say that at the onset, very much like Lynn did, there's no material difference in the onboarding or the training for traditional or non-traditional. I don't think we're nimble enough, any academic institution, to offer that at this point. However, having been a sector switcher and moving into academia, higher ed from the private sector, I take a special interest in these people because I have walked a path that they're on, and where I am now, they soon will be, and where they are, I once was. And so that there's a vernacular or a connective tissue that I leverage so that I can identify, they can identify with where they are and what they're going to experience, and really truly point out the things that, boy, I wish I had when I was at MIT for the first 6 months. I will say that the other way, another person that I have brought on recently, and boy, you're absolutely right, Dan, I would suggest to anybody on the chat that's considering hiring from within their organization, from the admissions department, just do it. I'm telling you, it is fantastic. It is almost the exact same job. They're functionally almost doing the same thing. They just need to change the nomenclature a little bit, and it's I'm telling you, the pace, what they're doing, it's the same thing. And one of these people I just hired to run a program that we're getting off the ground here. The way that I have handled her onboarding is I also run principal gifts. I've actually made her part of the principal gift team. Her portfolio doesn't look like that at all, but I purposely have done that so that she can drink from a fire hose and learn our pace and learn our language and learn the 10,000 foot and down into the weeds piece. Not everybody can do that. That's not something that I think is going to be able to be scaled necessarily, but boy, when you get somebody you know is going to be good, and we've all made those hires, just put them in situations where they will learn quickly and they will absorb it very, very fast, and you'll be pleased. So I guess those are two answers to your question, Dan.
Thanks, James.
And then Dan,
Mike,
you talk about slightly smaller. We have about 20 to 23 people on our team. But no, we just brought on he's was in the textbook sales for a company here in Dubuque, Loris grad, so very familiar. Toward the back end stage of his career, but so in terms of a cultural standpoint, not understanding Loris, and he'd been involved with our local network here in town, but being a little smaller. So what we've done is obviously you hit the ground running, and he has his portfolio. We do a lot. I'm a big believer from my days at NML, and then also from Ernst & Young at joint calls. And so we put Patrick out on joint calls with each of the development officers. So, and he's been out on the joint call with me as well. And then we do a lot of role playing. And then I really think from his background and how he had to generate business, it's a real opportunity for us to utilize his skill set in terms of getting appointments from someone that I would consider cold. So we focused in on that and tried to utilize his strengths and put him in a position to utilize his strengths where he can have success, and then we'll work on those other areas where maybe we need to help him with his development skills, just because some of it's a little bit different for him. But we've had great success. He's hit the ground running, and he's already had some major gifts received. So it's been a good start for us there.
That's great. Last topic I want to touch on before we move into questions from our audience today is this idea of an internship program. Lynn, I know that University of Michigan's internship program, the Development Summer Internship Program, I think it's called, is one of the longest running and sort of the gold standard from the research that I've uncovered. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about that program, how long it's been in place, and sort of where folks have they stayed with University of Michigan, or have they gone on to other opportunities? Where are the folks that have gone through that program?
Okay, sure. So as you said, the Development Summer Internship Program, it's in its 11th year, I believe. And I'm just looking at my notes for a sec. We've had 268 graduates of the program. So we take about 25 University of Michigan students per summer. We usually get about 130 to 160 applicants, something like that. So it's a pretty selective program. And we've had 30% going into the profession. I mean, that's our goal. We're not necessarily having this program so that we can raise our own fundraisers. We want to help the profession and broaden the profession and expose people to the profession. So that's really been the goal, versus working for us. But we do have a strong handful working for us now as permanent employees. I was trying to think just off the top of my head, a number of major gift officers. We've got somebody at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, and somebody in student philanthropy and student life, a strong handful across campus. We also have a couple people in stewardship, one who I'm thinking of that's doing prospect research for us. So, the big lesson in having an internship program is to definitely hire people across your schools and colleges for the summer as interns, because they're bringing in all kinds of things. I mean, we like to see not only business majors, but neuroscience and engineers, people that are interested in data analytics. So we have projects for them all through our development community and in all kinds of different areas. So that's been really, really helpful. And one thing, too, is we try to keep them engaged after they've been interns. So whether it's to continue on where they were working for the summer, through the school year, if that's possible, or giving them opportunities with the program. So the following year they go to student groups and they talk about the program, or they are involved in some student philanthropy efforts. That really helps. And then often they go out into the world and work in the fundraising arena elsewhere and come back to us, or not. We have some folks working in Australia now in fundraising.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And Mike, you had mentioned to me that you either have done the first year of a program or are looking to implement an internship program.
No, we're in our first year with an intern, and I don't think we're going to grow it next year where we're going to have two. But again, size and scale in terms of our shop. But it's been a tremendous success. In the internship, we have student workers involved throughout the year, but this internship is related to a Loris Legacy Ball that we started last year, and we're in our second year where it's a special fundraiser to fund a scholar program we have put together. And so this person was interested in event coordination, stewardship in that area that we hired, and it's just been a great success because we have volunteers from the area, friends of the college, as well as alums. And so not only has our intern had interactions with our staff and putting together all the planning that goes into this huge program that's critical to our success for the year, they've also had the opportunity to work with donors and friends of the college on a volunteer basis who are working with them. So we're going to enhance it in that we're going to bring you on the intern for our alumni program as well. for our alumni office next year. So it's been a tremendous success, and helps us identify potential hires as I anticipate it will as we move forward.
Right. James, I don't think I've asked you this before. Is there an internship program at Marquette, or have there been thoughts of anything like that?
Yeah, there have been thoughts. We are certainly interested in it. It's been successful at other places, and it'd behoove us to take a look at it. We don't have anything as sophisticated as Lynn or as formal as Mike, but we do have a pretty defined history of student workers that turn into employees, particularly from the administrative side, right after school. And boy, I'll tell you, a larger percentage of them stay on to move up and accept roles into annual fund and then into major gift than I would have expected. It may be the difference between a large and a small market, or a different kind of market than the big cities. But I will say that we have shown success in that particular evolution of the profession, and we'll continue to look for the student workers that demonstrate the kind of abilities that we would look for in a traditional interview.
Great. And I think we're about at the point where we should hand it over to audience questions, but want to give each of you an opportunity if you have last thoughts that we haven't covered, or that came to mind during the discussion today.
I want to just raise something that when you think about a pipeline or people, when positions come open that you already know, one thing that we do in addition to informational interviews, and I'm happy to to chat with anybody about this, is we do something called career chats, where we have people from development across the development community at Michigan, from various schools, colleges, and units. We pick about 15, and we invite the public as well as some candidates that we know have been in searches, and they come to a program of about 2 hours where there's a short presentation. We do some speed interviewing, something we call quick connections, and they have an opportunity to guests to have their resume reviewed and things like that. So it's a way to discover new talent and steward existing talent by having a short program. So that's been really successful in terms of meeting people in all different walks of life.
And the only thing I'll add is don't prejudge when you look at a resume. You never know, and I'll just give you my example. Had I not known the vice president that ultimately had me come in and interview folks, the person who I ultimately reported to went to one of the development officers, who actually called on me when I was a donor outside, and said, "Why would this guy come here? We shouldn't even talk to him." But you just don't prejudge or say no for the person. At least if you think somebody looks good on paper, what's a half hour to at least pick up the phone and have a conversation? You may be surprised with what you find out.
Very good. I think those are good to end on. I'm interested to see what kind of questions we have.
Great. Sarah, who do we have?
All right, I'm going to start with Mark. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right,
thanks,
go
everyone.
ahead and answer your question live.
This is a very interesting topic. Thanks so much for your time. Many non-traditional hires are passionately connected to their day-to-day work with the organization, which is outside of the development department. Do you ever creatively shape people's job descriptions to allow them to stay involved in something outside of development, or do you recommend a hard stop on their other roles?
Interesting. Anybody volunteer to address that one?
Sure. No, I'll be the heavy here. I think for their best interests and for their ability to take on changing everything, I would suggest to them to make an investment in themselves and to not do those things, particularly at the level that they're passionate and used to doing. It's a tough transition, and if you're bifurcated in terms of your focus, that's going to be a longer learning curve. And this is something that I think both the employee and the organization is going to want to be truncated. So for those reasons alone, I would suggest, take a gap year on those things. Once you get some competency under you, you could certainly go back to them. The passion doesn't die, but right now it's about focus and growing in a different direction. And I would strongly urge people to move away from that or minimize that, and then go back to it later.
I'll just add, I agree with that. Having been in the position when I first came to Loris, Ernst & Young wanted me to stay on as a part-time presenter for financial education workshops, and it wouldn't have worked. It would not have worked in what I needed to learn and accomplish in the first couple of years.
Thank
Lynn,
you.
is that something that you've seen at all in University of Michigan?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, no, because once they get a job with us in development, there's no room for them to work in another part of the university or another kind of job in the university, and it wouldn't happen here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, we are going to head into our next question. Stacy, are you there?
I'm here.
Great, go ahead.
Thank you again to the panelists. I agree, this is a great topic. My question is around how to ensure you're attracting ideal candidates to your job. And based on what you're talking about, you covered this a little bit in talking about transferable skills, but what would you say are the most important qualifications to put on that job description to find the right person? Thinking about the qualities and knowledge, skills, and abilities that somebody's got to have to succeed.
So I'll go. I have I'm not sure. I'm not going to answer it from the perspective of what would you put on the job description, because I don't. But I can address the part with what are the things that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing candidates that are non-traditional. I think that's probably most helpful from my perspective, and then I'll listen to the others. I think the single most important thing that I try to find in somebody that I'd like to hire is somebody that has grit. That's something that can't be necessarily taught. It's experience. It's grown. It's something that is, but you know, how you define it and how people define it is slightly different. But that's an important piece of this. Lynn has talked about natural curiosity. That's got to be omnipresent in every conversation that you have with folks. You know, you've got to be able to test for that, and that's something that I certainly do. Being conditioned to a fast-paced environment, yep, you know, you can kind of tell where they're coming from to know if that's something that they've had in their past vocational experiences. But you know, self-awareness and executive presence, those are two really important pieces. These are people that are going to be representing your university and are going to be in front of, you know, very successful individuals, and they're going to be interested in the content of the conversation, but they're also going to be judging what's in front of them in terms of how that reflects towards the brand of the university they're coming from, and those have got to match up. And I think that so I really pay attention to that. You know, for the universities that I've served in my time, I think you've got to be hyper organized, or speaking as a person that's working on the organized part, really have the ability to be functional with administrative staff. One of the two works, but you do have to have one of two of those skills, and they have to be excellent. I think that, you know, beyond that, we talked about pace and making the transition, understanding how to operate in an academic environment. And there are lots of components to that to unpack, which I won't do here, but those are, in a nutshell, the things that I look for, Stacy.
Yeah, and I would add, in terms of the posting question, I mean, a variety of things work, but one thing that's becoming common, a little more common, and it's expensive still, but there's software now, and we actually purchased a license for it. There's software that, you know, you can run job postings through, and they can at least highlight for you some areas that you might be, you know, you just don't notice that have some sort of bias, or, you know, something that you're just not picking up that will highlight it, and it may be something you ignore, or, you know, much like spell check or not, but, you know, those kinds of programs probably will come down in price, and I think they can be worthwhile.
The only other point I'll add is that I look for folks that have had to hit a number, because it's a numbers game, and I have folks at Loris say to me all the time, I don't know how you do it with, you know, you have to hit the number and you live by the number. Well, that's the business. So all these other skills are equally important, but can you handle there is a pressure to hit that number.
That's a great point.
Interesting. interesting. There is just one final comment from one of our listeners that I'm going to share with everyone on the call, just because I think it's interesting for us to listen to. But so here goes. Having worked with colleagues from non-traditional backgrounds, I also like to emphasize the importance of listening early to perspectives they bring, as well as teaching them about development. I have learned so much from them. Cross-pollination is an undervalued power, for opportunity often exists in the space between things. Those of us in development can mine this creative space to continue to evolve in the profession as the world evolves.
Well said.
Yeah.
Very
I
true.
don't know if you had any initial thoughts on that, but.
Well, one of the things I sometimes ask in interviews that are questions around creativity, because a lot of times, there's very complex questions coming from donors in terms of, a fund they want to give to that doesn't exist, or, these kinds of things, and ways to be creative, get doctors on board, and other kinds of faculty, and it can be very political. So I like to see, I like to ask questions around creativity with solving problems. I think that's a great avenue for people that are non-traditional.
I like the listening to them early on, and particularly on the perspectives piece that the author wrote there. I have served in an organization, General Electric, that is a matter of best practice, repeatedly moves managers from one sector to another that has absolutely no competency in the other sector on purpose, so that they can have fresh eyes and fresh ability to look at problems, so that they may be able to engineer solutions around known or unknown constraints that they may not be able to see because they're inundated, they're in it, they're desensitized to it. So I agree with the author of that, because when you do have new eyes on it, particularly if they have a competency they're bringing with them, it could be a real benefit to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm living it right now and experiencing it in terms of over the last 2 years of some of the silos we've broken down by accident with me, maybe not by accident, but in terms of me being CFO as well as overseeing the advancement office here. It's just that it's what James just said. What he was just saying described my experiences over the last 2 years, because I had no clue about the CFO position going into it. I just had the background. They thought I could figure it out.
And to that author's point also, it's all about diverse perspectives in all kinds of ways, and we're looking at that here, and I know across higher ed in general. So diversity of perspective.
Do we have any more questions, or
well, we're
even
pretty
time?
much out of time. Yeah, so I want to be respectful to everybody's calendars.
All right. Well, I just want to thank all of our attendees, and particularly our panelists for their time today. We look to continue this discussion with further research and thought leadership, and really appreciate all of your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
all
very much.
Good seeing you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.